What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, man. It's good to have you here. Recently, I've been reading a lot of Plato, and I've sort of fallen head over heels in love with Socrates. And it's hard for me to describe why, but really it's because, to me, every word that Socrates speaks is like poetry that like moves me to my core. And the same thing happens when I read the King James Version of the Bible, but more specifically the words of Jesus. It's like pure poetry to me, like so skilled with words, and it just blows me away that it's able to really motivate me and cause me to think and really put my life into perspective. And I pursue this sort of thing. And I recently finished a certain book called The Symposium. And about 2/3 of the way through the book, there's a new character introduced into the dialogue whose name is Alcibiades. And Alcibiades sort of gives a speech sort of praising Socrates, because they were lifelong friends. When Alcibiades was young, Socrates was his teacher. They even served in the army together. They went way back. And it was a very moving speech, and I kind of want to give you a few highlights out of it. So Alcibiades says about Socrates that if you were to sort of just be walking by or like eavesdropping, you just catch a bit of the conversation that Socrates is having with someone else, your first impression may be to just write it off. Like, it might seem like a bunch of idle talk, a bunch of nonsense, like there's no point in talking about this. Like, it might seem like what Socrates is talking about even could be considered even common sense sometimes, but if you were to sit down and really have a genuine conversation with Socrates, that you will witness something extraordinary. Alcibiades compared Socrates to a certain type of statue that you could buy in the market at the time. They were pretty unique statues in description. I, at least, had never heard of anything like this, but these statues were, I would say anywhere from 1 foot to 2 feet tall, and they had a compartment of the chest and stomach that could open up. And these statues were of the various gods that the people of the time believed in, right? So these statues of the gods would open up, and inside of the storage place, there was these little, sometimes figurines, and sometimes these little small ornate boxes inside of the statue that the purchaser of the statue, the follower of that particular god, would store items in these little boxes that would remind them of the virtues, of the characteristics of the god, right? And what they were pursuing in their life, how they were trying to be, the person that they wanted to be, or the god that they wanted to emulate in life. You see what I mean? So Alcibiades offered a comparison between Socrates and one of these statues, right? Alcibiades said that over his lifetime, he had had the privilege of listening and hearing many great speakers give lecture. And even though he knew that they were a great speaker, and what they were saying even could be correct or true, when they were done speaking, there was no effect left on him. He was not moved at all. There was absolutely no effect. He just walked away with nothing. He was never inspired, never motivated. But when he spoke to Socrates, he couldn't help but be moved in his very spirit, in his soul, he says. He says he would be moved to tears, sometimes of joy, sometimes of happiness. and even sometimes of shame. And this was a huge thing for Alcibiades, to feel shame over his way of life. Because Alcibiades was somewhat vain. He was a very attractive man, and he really embraced this part of himself. And Socrates sort of made him question that as just the appearance of beauty. But is there real beauty within you, sort of thing? And no one was able to cause Alcibiades to question this, like Socrates. Also, Alcibiades was a politician. He was involved in the politics of the city. And he admitted himself that he would give in to the crowd. He had a large desire to please the crowd. And in order to do so, sometimes he would stray away from his own moral character just to please the crowd. And he never felt shame about that. In fact, he felt like that was what he was supposed to be doing. But Socrates was able to cause him to feel shame and question himself, and to inspire him to be a better man. And he said on more than one occasion, he got into a deep conversation with Socrates, and he witnessed with his own eyes the chest of Socrates open up. And there, inside of the man Socrates, he witnessed the most brilliant, shining, ornate little boxes filled with to the brim, overflowing with the brilliant virtue of the gods themselves, that the actual virtue of the gods themselves was inside of Socrates, and was not just the mere appearance of virtue, that it was really there. He saw it for himself, and this was what was able to move his very spirit. This is the power of God within man. And how does it happen? Well, Socrates spent his entire life in pursuit of virtue, to please the gods. And this means he was attempting to be like them, to embody their characteristics, to learn from them. And in doing so, by applying himself 100% to this pursuit, he was honored by the gods. The gods came and sat with Socrates, spoke to him, ministered to him, and through him. You see, it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. It becomes easy over time, especially in today's world, to ignore that small and still voice inside of us that you could call your intuition or your conscience, that sort of warns you about a situation, or maybe causes you to question something that you're thinking about doing, or a certain part of your lifestyle. It calls you to question that. But it becomes very easy to simply ignore that and put it on the back burner, because when you look around, everyone else is doing it. Can't be bad, right? It's very easy to simply ignore it. And this causes a general disconnect. It puts you at odds with yourself and the world around you on a deep, deep level, in your spirit, in your soul. But to pursue God or godliness is to honor the gods, is to please the gods. And by pleasing the gods, by honoring the gods, they will honor you. God will honor you in this pursuit, will honor that sacrifice, and come and sit down and have dinner with you. Tonight, we'll sup with you. And it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, until next time, I hope you continue to free your mind.